Welcome to Outliers Get to Know. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn, and I am here with New York Times bestselling author Tasha Alexander to talk about her new historical mystery, The Sisterhood. Welcome to the show, Tasha.
Thanks, Tracy. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all mine, absolutely all mine. I think you're in Wyoming, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Are you starting to see hints of yellow in those aspen trees out there now that
We
we're into autumn?
sure are. I would say in the last 3 days, 3 days ago, they were green,
Yeah.
green, green, and now they are getting that gold.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have a friend who makes a journey out to Idaho almost every year, and she's a cowgirl. And she goes out there and helps out with one of the ranches there, and she just loves the aspen. She comes back and she talks about them all the time, and I have yet to see them, so that's on my bucket list.
Well, you need to come visit us in Wyoming and see our aspen.
All
They are
right, all
beautiful.
right.
You get that blue, blue sky and that
Oh, yeah.
golden, and the way they quake, the leaves quake, as
Yeah.
they call them, the quaking
Oh.
aspen, and it's just stunning.
Love it. Yeah, I definitely have to get out that way and
Yes.
take a look at them in the fall. But before we dive into the sisterhood, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey, how you got here?
Sure. So I guess for me, it really started with reading, which I think is the path for a lot of us writers. Um, my first memory, hand on heart, is I was sitting with my mother in the house I grew up in. She was reading Little House in the Big Woods to me by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And at some point, I realized I was further ahead of her on the page. And that I just thought, wait, you don't need a grown up to do this? When you're little, people read to you, and
Hmm.
and it just opened the world because I could just pick up a book and read it by myself. And I've just always been a voracious reader, and I will read anything. I never understand people who are like, well, I only read this kind of book. But I mean, we should all be reading what we want to read, but I will
Right.
read anything. And I think if you just love reading that much, it's natural to want to write your own story because everything turns out exactly the way you'd like it to. It's just really
So
fun.
true.
It's kind of the ultimate reading experience, except at the same time, you can never really read the book because you wrote the book. But so I had always wanted to write, going way, way, way back. And when I was a kid, I used to write terrible short stories that I would bind in cardboard and tie with yarn. Um, but then, you grow up and there's rent and there's health insurance and you have to get a soul-crushing job, or in my case, a series of soul-crushing jobs. And I had this thing because I think in our society we have such a tendency to define people by what their work is, which usually is the least interesting thing about a person, I think.
Hmm.
But I would be out and people would say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm working whatever soul-crushing job I was working at the moment." But then I would always say, "But I want to be a writer."
Oh,
And so fast forward to my son was 3.5, and I was reading Gaudy Night by Dorothy L. Sayers, who's this wonderful British mystery writer who wrote in the 20s. And I mean, the details of the book don't matter, but she has a character, Harriet Vane, who is trying to decide whether or not to get married. And she's a British woman in the 20s, so she's concerned that if she gets married, she's going to give up her identity and not be, she's not going to be able to continue to do the things she cares about. And she's talking to a friend, and the friend says, no, 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 no. If you really know what you want to do, nothing will stand in your way. Everything will be steamrolled in front of you.
uh,
And when I read that, I just thought, because there's nothing easier than finding a reason that you can't write.
exactly.
I have my job, I have to do this, I have a kid, all these things. And I'm always saying, oh, but I can't, but I can't. But when I read that, it just like it like reached through the page and grabbed me and
That's
shook
great.
me. And I just thought, all right, I either have to sit down and start writing, or I have to stop saying I want to be a writer. Because if I really want to, then I got to try to do it. So
Yeah.
the next morning, I sat down and started writing what became my first book. And at that point, my son was so young. We were totally broke. I had no babysit. It's just I would like get him playing Legos for 20 minutes and write for a little. And I think that at that point I was so past where, I think a lot of us when when you want to be a writer, you think, oh, I'm going to write this amazing novel and it needs to be important and this and that. But then you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I just want to write a book that I would like to read. And
Hmm.
so instead of trying to put on airs or pretensions, I just thought, what am I interested in? What do I like? What kind of book do I like to read? And I knew absolutely nothing about the publishing industry, which I think was good because I think if I had understood,
Yeah.
needing to get an agent and all these things and how hard it was, I would have been daunted, but I was too naive to even know any of that. So I just
Hmm.
sat down and wrote this book. And then I realized, you need to query and get an agent. And in that, I was so just I think I used up my lifetime's worth of luck. I found an agent who I really wanted to query. And I mean I knew that you should query multiple agents, but I don't know how you feel about this, but I found writing the query letter 1 million times harder than writing the
Oh,
novel,
yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah. How do
you
you
have to try to
condense
summarize.
400 words? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't. And to this
Yeah.
day,
It's
my agent,
terrible.
when my editor says, "Can you write a blurb about the book?" Anne is like, "I've got you covered. You can't do this. You need 400 pages." So I so I had a list and she was at the top of my list. And I thought, well, I'll query her. And then when I hear back, which is a terrible, you should send it out to like 50 people, but I didn't know any better. And it was actually St. Patrick's Day. I queried her at about noon, took my son to the park. By the time I came home from the park, she had replied and said, I love this premise. Can you FedEx me the manuscript? Because this was back when you were still, you
Yeah.
were emailing manuscripts. Um, and she read the book, and we've been together ever since.
That's amazing. Oh,
Yeah,
I love that. It feels rare that that happens,
yeah,
that you have the same agent for the span of your entire, I mean, that's what we all hope for. And I
it's
think that's what
true.
we go into it for, but sometimes these things just
It
don't work
doesn't
out.
always
But
work,
yeah,
and I feel like it was also just it was luck because when you're trying to find an agent, it's very hard to know who would be the right fit.
you're right.
And
Exactly.
yeah, because how do you determine that? It's
It's
true.
probably 100 times hard, although they had the Writer's Digest book of
Yes,
agents or something
that's
like
that's what I
that,
had.
which,
Yep.
okay, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I was starting to think, I'm like, you can't just go on their website and find out what they
Right.
represent back then. So, but
No.
they did have that handy little book. So
Yeah,
that made it a little easier. Well, that's amazing. So you sold your first book.
I did.
So that's okay. So that wasn't your practice book. That was the book that got
Yeah.
sold. So that's even more amazing. So I'm just in awe here. That's great. You got your first book sold, you got your first aid, the first agent that you queried, and that's wonderful. It's like we said, it doesn't always happen, so it's really nice to hear a story
Yeah,
like that.
but I think it's so important to remember that it doesn't really mean any like it's just that I was lucky that I
Hmm.
picked her. It
Yeah.
was and that you're lucky that she knew the right editor, because
Hmm.
it could take 100 queries and lots of submissions, and
Yeah.
that has no bearing on the quality of what you've written. It's just time and place, really.
But that's all yours too, right? The quality of the manuscript got you that agent, and that's where luck doesn't come into play. That's just
True.
talent, right?
No, and I
That's
think, but you
just
have to
talent.
have both.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah,
have
oh
both,
yeah,
I think.
absolutely. I think so too. Yeah, you
Yeah.
bet. So, The Sisterhood is the latest in your best-selling Lady Emily mystery series. What can you tell us about this most recent adventure with Emily and Colin?
Yeah, so this one I wanted to bring them back to London because I tend to move them all over the world, which I had wanted to do from the beginning just because I think it's a fun way to see the world when you're reading, which was always
Hmm.
something I love to do. But, you know, I in the very beginning, picked having a British protagonist because I'm an Anglophile. I mean, I married an Englishman. I had to go find my own Mr. Darcy. Um,
Yeah.
but I like to bring them back to London periodically, and I felt like it was time to be back in England. Um, Partly just because I do love that and love having them kind of grounded there, but also because I really, for a long time, I've been kicking around ideas about writing about Boudica, the famous warrior queen who defeated the Romans temporarily in the ancient era. And so this seemed like a great time to do that. And the other reason I really wanted it London, I mean, Boudica obviously was in Britain and went through Londinium, but she is such an example of what women have been able to do in history. I think a lot of us have this idea that history is this timeline that kind of gradually gets a little better for people, a little better, a little bit. And of course it's not. If you look at how women have been treated over the centuries, it's more like this, it goes up and down. But Boudica has been used by so many people as a source of inspiration. But in this, I'm up to in the series, the early, well, I guess kind of we're getting mid Edwardian. Um, you've got the suffragettes. And Boudica was such an inspiration to them because here's this woman who could do whatever she wanted and get things done. And so I thought it was a great way to tie the two storylines together, to have some insight into what was happening in the suffragette movement at that time, and then looking at how women in the ancient past dealt with their role in society.
Yeah, yeah. I really loved how you wove, is it Vada? Is that how you
Boudica,
pronounce
yeah.
it?
I
Vada?
think so. I mean, none of us, we don't even really know what language the Iceni
Mm,
speak. And is it Iceni? I mean, we don't,
yeah.
there's so little that we know. So yeah, Vada, I think.
Okay, well, that's what we'll go with, at least for this interview, right? Yeah, I really loved how you wove Vada and Boudica's story into the mystery that's set in this Edwardian time. And I want to be very careful and not give away spoilers, but I thought that connection that you made was very unique and very clever. I thought it
Oh,
was really,
thank
really
you.
clever. Yeah, you bet. So I was wondering, like, during your research, did you find evidence of an individual named Vada, or is
Yeah.
she from your
Yeah,
imagination, or
she is wholly fictional. And when I started doing the research, I was actually shocked by how little we know about Boudica. There is literally no archaeological record of her. Nothing.
mm,
We've never
mm,
found anything that has her name on it.
huh,
We've never found, so the only source, the only primary, I mean primary really in quotes, because primary sources that we have are the Roman writers. We have Tacitus, we
uh,
have Dio Cassius, and or Cassius Dio. I don't really understand why you can say it either way, but you can. Um, we know that the only things that we know about her are written by Romans who were her enemies.
yeah,
And so, but when you read those sources, they're very complimentary of her. She was a great warrior. She did defeat the Romans and then was subsequently defeated by them later. But they praise her. They heap praise on her. And scholarly debate thinks about, okay, why are they doing that? And the one of the most popular or common theories is that when those two writers are writing, Rome was in a period where people were saying, oh, everything's out of control here. People are behaving in horrible ways. We're losing Roman virtue. All these things are changing and everything's awful. And that's why this stupid, they didn't say this upstart Britain would defeat us because we had let the Roman values slide. So those writers are writing with an agenda. So we
uh-huh,
really you can't think of those sources as wholly reliable. So I had
mhm,
I had started thinking I would have her be the point of view character, but then when I realized how little we really know about her, There are some coins that have her husband's name on them. But we don't know where exactly her tribe was living. We don't know where the
Mm,
quote palace was. So in the end, I thought, you know what, I just am going to create a fictional point of view character so that,
yeah.
because I always feel like when you're writing about a real person, you have to be so careful about not putting words in their mouth that
Mm,
you can't argue they might have said. I mean, obviously
mhm.
it's fiction, you're fictionalizing, but you want to be true to the I don't know, like the fundamental character of the person. And so I felt
Yeah.
like I couldn't know enough about her to really to do that with enough, I don't know, enough care. And so having Vada, it enabled me to create her wholly fresh and then bring in things about Boudica that we do know and to get the
Hmm.
history with Roman Britain and what the culture was like. I just decided in the end we needed Vada.
Yeah, well, I liked Bada, and I found myself very invested in her story, and and her interest in poetry, which I loved those bits that you
Yeah.
included in there, and that connection that she had with the Roman. I won't even try to pronounce his name,
Gaius
Gaius.
Marius.
Okay,
Yeah.
that she had with him. It was you approached it in a different way. It just I don't even know how to explain it, but I they had that common interest in poetry, and then things, developed from there. So it wasn't like a, at least not from Vada's perspective. Maybe it was from his. It wasn't like this instant, attraction and
Right.
that sort of thing. It grew, and I really loved how you did that. I thought that was great.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they were fun to write.
Yeah, I could, it's, and uh, in case folks haven't figured it out, there is a dual timeline. So
Yes.
there's one that Tasha calls the Britannia timeline, and then or yeah, Britannia. Is that how
Yeah.
you say it? Britannia
Britannia,
timeline.
Britannia, who
And then
knows?
yeah, and then London, of course. And so, and each of those chapters were short, but you packed so much into each of those ancient chapters. And it was just such talent to do
Oh,
that. That was
thank you.
great.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's go to London, and I want to talk about Lady. I know this might seem weird because I'm not talking about the mystery part, which was great, and it was a nice twist and all of that wonderful twist at the end. But there was this dynamic between Lady Emily and her mother,
Mhm.
and how I want to call Lady Emily's mother just a pill. She was just a
Yeah,
pill the way that she
yes.
talked to
She,
her daughter. And yeah, can you talk about that a little bit
yeah,
maybe?
I mean, that's kind of been a thing that we come back to periodically through the series. And the thing with Lady Bromley is she is very much of her era. She is a sturdy Victorian matron who has very clear ideas about how people should behave,
Yeah.
about what is best for everyone. And, she at this point is really a fixture from the previous century. Um, Emily, on the other hand, is this much more progressive woman, as they would say, the new woman who, doesn't want to just be relegated to the drawing room and being kind of an accessory. You have your wife and you have a plant. Um,
Yeah.
but I think the thing with Lady Bromley that I always try to keep it in the back of my mind when I'm writing her is she truly believes that the way she wants her daughter to behave is the only way to make sure her daughter has a safe, happy life. And
Hmm.
so you're kind of seeing these two worldviews that just are not compatible.
Yeah.
They are not compatible. And
Yeah.
Lady Bromley just cannot bring herself into the 20th century. And that's immensely frustrating for Emily because she's educated. And her father had always let her read, given her books. given her a little more freedom, and her mother is always trying to push her down to
Mhm.
be proper. And so I think, whenever one thing about that, especially that late Victorian era, is you're getting so much social change in a short period of
Mhm.
time. And periods like that are really difficult for people on either end of the people who are like, no, we must not,
Yeah.
let women vote. I mean, how crazy, who would think, that's acceptable? And then it's hard for the people trying to drag them into the new century. Um, and the thing with that kind of wholesale social change that you start seeing in the Victorian period going into the Edwardian, and up until now, when you're seeing that huge kinds of change, there are always people who iconoclasts who seem to have sprung from the womb, ready to fight for social justice and change, and let's treat people better. And they are essential to those fights. But until you start getting the regular people who don't maybe have as vested an interest, who
Mhm.
are like, who don't have the time and the wherewithal to just dedicate their life to fighting for this, until those people start getting on board, you can't have that change. And
Mhm.
so while Lady Bromley is never going to be on board, you know, I think it's important to, when you're writing about that kind of time period, to have some characters who are reminding you that, not every, especially with the suffragette stuff, because today, I mean, I don't think well, maybe there are. I would like to believe there aren't people in the Western world saying, well, letting those women vote, that was a terrible idea. So that's such an obvious thing to it. Like that change has been so wholesale that most people accept that. Um,
Mhm.
but that was not the case. And in fact, one of the earlier books in the series touches on this as well. And it would have been set, I'm trying to remember what year that book was, at least 10 years before this book is set. Maybe, yeah, maybe even like a dozen years. And at that point in time, in actual history, the most radical suffragette organization in Britain was a group called the Women's Liberal Federation. And so these were the most rabidly, just they weren't violent, but I mean they were the cutting edge of the suffragette movement. And they had a schism amongst their members where they actually divided into two separate groups. And so these are the most radical women, right? The most radical
Mhm.
suffragettes. Half of them in the 1890s are saying, oh, well, let's not get carried away. We don't need to vote. That was the issue dividing them.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so it's just so hard and that was partly because to them, I mean, if you're brought, like to us, that sounds crazy, but if you are brought up in a society
Mhm.
where, who you're married to is so important, you might not even have had a say in who that man is. But there was this fundamental belief that your husband would take care of you. And so what these women were saying was, if you say I need the right to vote, what you're really saying is that my husband doesn't love me enough and care about me enough to vote in my best interests.
Yeah.
And these are
Yeah.
radical suffragettes.
Mhm.
So I think it's just important, like with Lady Bromley, like we need to remember that there still would have been people who are just opposed to women reading what they want to read or dressing the way they want to dress, let alone voting. So,
Yeah, yeah, it was a, you think about going back to that time period and oh, wouldn't it be kind of neat? And there's just certain bits of it like that would just, for a modern woman, that
yeah,
would just be so and so. It would
it
just,
would be
oh
because
yeah,
even if you're around people who are enlightened, they're still enlightened
yeah.
Victorians or enlightened Edwardians, and there's so much that we take for granted that
Hmm.
those women just had to fight tooth and nail to get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yes,
And
yeah, Lady Bromley's always a foil for Emily with her progressive, radical ideas of thinking that she should be able to think for herself.
Yeah, I felt so bad for Lady Emily at times that I just wanted to reach into the pages and just give her a big hug and it'll be all right,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So, but yeah, I want to be very careful about what I say next because I don't want to muck anything up here. But that what you were talking about the different elements of the suffragettes, and you have this group in there in the story that are going about it a completely different
Yes.
way. And again, it's like what a unique approach to that issue, right? Just so
Yes.
unique and so upper crust way of looking
Mhm.
at that, like you were saying. So no, that was great. So folks, read the books. I want to talk about it with somebody. Read the book. But this story, I think I saw was your 19th Lady Emily book. Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
That's right.
Just you hear about some authors after writing a number of books in the same series, some kind of ache to do something a little bit different, or they
Yeah.
just simply burn out. Yeah, when I listen to you talk about this story and Lady Emily and that I don't feel that from you. And I'm curious, what keeps you excited about writing in
Yeah.
Lady Emily's world, 19
Yeah.
books later, you know?
Well, I mean, because you don't think you're ever going to write that many books, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, I just so love that time period. And I picked it very deliberately, knowing that there was all that social change happening. So there's always some meat there to think about. And then I also deliberately set things up so that Emily would be traveling because I felt like just in my own reading experience, there are lots of series that I love that are in the same place every time.
Yeah.
But that I think for me would be harder to stay excited about because you kind of
Hmm.
it's like you're writing, it's the same but different, right? And
Yeah.
so by having Emily travel to different places in the world, you get to explore another culture. You get to see what's happening in a different part of the world. How
Yeah.
are women treated there? What's happening politically? I mean, not that I'm trying to be all political or something, but like
Right.
what
Right.
there's
It's part of
interesting
it.
stuff going on.
Hmm.
And that gives you a backdrop that changes from book to book. And so I find that very helpful. And also the secondary timeline, because well, I love a dual timeline book. I love that. I love multiple points of view. Especially, I think it's because I've always been so excited by history. And one thing, if you start working in history, you see very quickly, like social mores change, clothing changes, all the accoutrements of a society change, but the people are fundamentally the same as we are.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it's easier to kind of comment on life and society and anything by putting it further in the past. And so even for Emily, like Emily can be looking at an issue that's affecting her either socially or within the case she's investigating. But if you are looking at the more distant past, it's easier to see it objectively or more
Mhm.
objectively because you're removing I mean, you always come to things with your own bias, but when you're talking about people who are so long ago, it's a little safer to say, "Hey, people really behave like this, don't they?" Instead of saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
we behave like this. Don't own it in the same way. So I think all of those things have helped me to keep it fresh, I hope, for the readers. And for me, I mean, because I do every time I get to the end of a contract, I think, okay, do I want to keep doing this? I mean, because there are other things I've had ideas that I someday would like to write, but I keep thinking, I have so much fun writing these books. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's great. That's great. Yeah. No, that's wonderful because like I say, 19 books in and you're still having a great time and there's
yeah,
still, like you say, so much more that you can research, which adds
yeah.
to your collection there in
Yes,
the background
yes,
too, right?
exactly. All the books.
Extra bonus, extra bonus.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, we'll switch gears here in just a little bit. I always like to ask guests to maybe talk about a recent book that you read that you really enjoyed and maybe tell us why.
yeah. This is a harder question than it should be. Do you ever have
I know.
do you ever have like a reading drought where
Oh yeah, yeah.
like we've been traveling and I read so many books and I was like, okay, I need someone to tell me what like they were all fine. But not every book can set you
Yeah.
on fire every time. And I
Right.
always feel like
Absolutely.
I feel like it's not the book's fault. It's like you have to pick the right book at the right
Mhm.
time for you in your life at the moment. And
Absolutely.
I've not been doing that well lately. So
Okay.
I need somebody to say, you have to read this.
All right. Okay. We'll pass on that one
Yeah.
then. Yeah, no problem. No problem. All right. Well, before we go, can you tell us what's up next? I assume you're either working on or you finished up a number 20, Lady Emily number 20.
I am actually I've got the last 100 pages to revise of number 20 before I give it to my editor. It's due October 1st. So I'm basically done, just kind of adding in atmosphere and things like that. And that is
Yeah.
set in India.
Oh, India, nice. Okay, great. That'll be
That's really
exciting.
fun.
Did
And
you get
actually, in
to
terms of reading, I mean that I've been reading a lot of just fascinating books about India. So that's been
hmm
great. But yeah.
Did you get to go to India to do any research
I
or
did.
is
I
Oh, that's
did.
wonderful.
And it was the most extraordinary thing because I had an idea in my head of what I thought I wanted the book to be about and where I wanted it to be set. And because the city Bhopal in India in the 19th century, it was a Muslim state and it was ruled by women.
Oh,
I thought that is so cool. Emily has to
yeah,
go talk to these
perf.
begums of Bhopal. But then, and the place was amazing. But then the place we went right after that is this very small town called Maheshwar, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly. My Hindi is not great. Um, but we were staying in this 18th century fort that had been built by a queen, Ahilia, who was just, I'd never heard of her. The fort is now a hotel and it is run by her descendants.
Oh,
So
wow.
Prince Richard, his older sister would be, if we still had Maharajas and Maharanis, she would be the Maharani. And Richard and his wife decided to turn the fort, because it's one of the properties that the family owns, turn it into a heritage hotel. I mean, he and his wife are your hosts. It's very small. You have dinner with every communal dinner every night. And he started telling me these stories about Ahelia and all of these extraordinary things she did during her life. And even before I talked to him, when I just stepped through the gate onto the fort is built up above this sacred river. So you're on this terrace, like looking down over this river with this gorgeous temple in the background. And I just got chill. I just knew. I was like, this is where the book has to be set. And then I started talking to Richard and hearing about Ahelia. And I was like, yep, whole new idea for the book. Throw everything else out.
Oh my gosh, that's
It's
amazing.
just been the most fun learning about her and the place and the people and the history. So
Oh, that's great. Well, I
yeah.
can't wait. Oh, we're gonna have to, it's gonna
Yeah.
be a
We'll
whole
have
year
to.
before we can dive into that one, I'm sure, right?
Right.
All right. Well, folks, when this episode airs, the Sisterhood will be out. I think it is out, right? Did
It
it?
came out yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yesterday. So it's out. So be sure and grab your copy today. You can check out Tasha's website at tashaalexander.com. Tasha, what social media platform are you most active on?
I would say Instagram. I mean, I'm not very active.
Yeah,
I've kind of
I
pulled
hear
back
ya.
from a lot of social media, but I am on Instagram. Well, and I had my Facebook author page was hacked and taken
Ugh.
over by people, and they were posting as me trying to sell tiny flashlights, which I still have a lot of questions about. But I managed to get them kicked off. But Meta also kicked me off, so I can't post on my own page. And now
Ugh.
I'm locked out of my personal Facebook page, and I'm like, maybe I'm okay with this. But
Yeah, it's just not
my
worth it sometimes.
Instagram automatically posts to Facebook, but I can no longer log into Facebook.
Oh my gosh. That is just,
Social media, it's great.
oh gosh, real life sometimes.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but you can find me on Instagram and
Okay.
I do sometimes post them.
All right, great. And is it just Tasha Alexander? Is that your
Yeah,
handle?
I think it's Tasha_Alexander.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks a ton, Tasha. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you and chat with you and also revisit Lady Emily. And I can't wait for readers to get their hands on the book.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. This has been so much fun. And
Oh,
I love
good.
that you've got my books there in the background. That
Yeah,
warms my heart. Thank you.
absolutely. All right. Well, many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'll be back soon with another great read.